Well, welcome into another Johnny Torch review. Today we're going to take on Andor Season 2. Now, I was honestly, I wasn't going to review Andor Season 2. I wasn't even going to watch Andor Season 2 because I wasn't really a fan of the first season. And if you watch my review videos of that, you will probably get the reasons why. I think I did two videos for this for like I split it up into two halves, which I honestly should have done here. That's why this video is probably going to be over an hour, because trying to talk about the whole thing in one video is just asking for trouble. But uh I really didn't like this concept of Star Wars for grown-ups, which is basically what they're trying to do with Andor. You know, your mileage may vary, but I'm pretty sure that everyone would agree that Star Wars is a family property, an all ages franchise. And the decision to push it more into a mature area, it's always heralded as a good thing by, middle aged people that can't understand that a franchise doesn't necessarily have to grow up with you. The tonal difference between both seasons of Andor and the original trilogy, for example, are enormous. The same can be said about the prequel trilogy. It exists as a bridge between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, but tonally it's quite different. I would go so far as to say it's tonally quite different from Rogue One. Now, Rogue One was successful. I thought it was a good movie. I still think it's a good movie. And I think it had enough flavor of Star Wars because what it did was it focused on the war aspect of Star Wars. It was basically a Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven, Seven Samurai, whatever way you want to look at it. It was basically an amalgamation of those types of war movies. And I think that's something that even appealed to George Lucas. I think he had nothing but positive things to say about Rogue One because it really took what was sort of the background principles in the OT and sort of focused them on, in sort of a classic Hollywood style, because Lucas really does focus, his style on a more old Hollywood thing, especially the prequel trilogy. It's grandeur and speaking in the King's English. And then of course we have the original trilogy, which is like more suited for like the World War II era and the semi gritty war pictures of the day. You kind of get that feeling, and the space battle at the end of A New Hope, or the space battle at the end of Rogue One, coupled with the ground action. So taking Andor, I figured Andor was going to be sort of an espionage thriller about spies and Andor's previous work in the rebellion to further the rebellion and so on and so forth. It didn't really turn out quite that way. What it became was, honestly, you can see it more in the second season. And I'm going all over the place with this, and I'm not planning on really doing a episode by episode breakdown, but we are going to try to look over each arc, because there's a year gap in between each three episodes. But it feels more so this season what the plan was all along, to sort of just be Les Miserables in space. You had that a little bit in the first season, but you have it even more in this season. And it's quite obvious. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to take your inspiration. I mean, George Lucas obviously took his inspiration from a lot of Kurosawa, Flash Gordon, and so on and so forth. So taking Les Miserables as a inspiration for Star Wars, not necessarily the worst thing in the world. But again, does that really jibe well with the tone of Star Wars overall? It depends. In this case, some of it was pretty engaging. I mean, I like the characters. I like a lot of these actors. I think Diego Luna is very good as Cassian. He's been given some, you know, challenging work to do here to try to be the focal point of this show when it has a lot of working pieces, and I think he does well enough. Stellan Skarsgård, I believe is his name, who plays Luthen Rail, of course, is a real scene stealer. And I think this will be remembered as his best work because he's a really great actor. He was in a lot of things, not the least of which, of course, in Marvel, he was in Thor. And, he's done a good job in this series to try to like anchor it as sort of the battle hardened slash world weary idealist where he knows what he has to do. He knows it's going to be ugly, and he knows that he can't honestly form an attachment to anyone while he's doing this. He has no mercy whatsoever as long as he's getting the job done. And he's really a fascinating character, and I think this was a real good character study for him as well as some of the other characters. All right, let's take needless to say, this is going to be spoilers, but I think everybody who's going to see the show already has seen it. And this is a late video, as a matter of fact. But again, like I said, I really wasn't even going to watch this show, but it was just everywhere. And I'd already invested a season and a half into seeing this, and I'd seen Rogue One, and I'm like, well, let me see where this goes. And I don't know, for the most part, I think it's an improvement over the last season because last season it felt very aimless to me. It felt like it was just Andor. He's along for the ride. He's kind of like he doesn't really believe in what he's doing with the rebellion, which again, this kind of goes against what we know about Andor from Rogue One, where he says he's been in the fight for since he was 6 years old. He really doesn't seem to commit to this cause until I don't remember if it was halfway through the first season or maybe in the final act of the first season, but he doesn't really seem to be quite committed to this until way into the storyline. All right, so the first episode, we'll talk about the first arc briefly. We'll go through the arcs briefly, and the first arc has Andor. He's stealing a TIE interceptor prototype, and he doesn't really know how to fly it. And he's supposed to meet with like a rebel cell on some planet, and it turns out to be the most ridiculous arc in the whole series, probably. I affectionately referred to them as the sweat hogs on Twitter, but I don't know. He's trying to drop off this TIE interceptor. They take him prisoner. They don't trust him. They don't believe him. They start offing each other and becoming fractioned. And basically nothing happens for like 2 episodes while they fight it out. Andor basically is prisoner and isn't really allowed to say much. He finally escapes while they're playing some kind of space version of rock, paper, scissors, which I wish I was joking about that, but that's actually what happens. And he escapes in the TIE interceptor and takes off. It really is just a waste of time. And that's kind of what the problem is with the show. Every episode, honestly, and I remember complaining about this in the first season, every episode could honestly be trimmed down to basically 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you really want it to breathe. But there is a lot of padding in these episodes. There's a lot of padding in the story arcs. In the same story arc, Mon Mothma's daughter is getting married off, as we remember in the previous season, in order to keep her, financially trying to keep the rebellion funded and so on and so forth. She has to make alliances with friends and bankers or whatever. And so in one instance, she had to lose her daughter to a rich banker guy's son and hope that that was going to be a union that would get her in good financially in order to keep the wheels turning on the rebellion, so to speak. And so there's a very long, protracted wedding for her daughter that just goes on and on and on. And I think one of the more interesting things that happens here at this juncture, I'm looking at my notes if I pausing for a few seconds here, but Mon Mothma's, and I think Mon Mothma is really, I want to say, kind of the star of the show in a way, because we know her from Return of the Jedi. We know she's going to survive, but seeing what she does and the sacrifices she makes and how, I think I've joked last season that she was the Stella Dallas of the galaxy. She basically is giving everything, her daughters, happiness and whatever. It doesn't really look like, at one point her daughter isn't really that happy about the wedding, but then Mon gives her the opportunity to back out, and she sort of just metaphorically spits in her face for suggesting such a thing. And and then of course the ending has Mon getting a little buzzed on some Saurian brandy or whatever they have there in Star Wars. And that was sort of the object of ridicule by a lot of people. I mean, if there's things to complain about in this series, it's probably the least thing to complain about. But the most interesting thing in this arc with the wedding, the Mon Mothma wedding, was Luthen basically has to step in because her friend that was he's like a childhood friend or whatever that sort of backed her up when the times were tough, is getting a little twitchy, and he's financially ruined. His wife left him, and he's a big shot in the banking industry or whatever, and he's kind of suggesting that he's not satisfied and he might look for a better offer, and that'll put her rebellion operation in jeopardy. Luthen, of course, once he gets that look in his eye, the old boy's had it, because he is not going to leave any loose ends. And we never really see or know exactly how this happened, but he makes sure that he's taken out of the picture. And Mon, again, this is like a first for her, where she learns that once you become a liability to the rebellion, Luthen is the most cold-hearted person in this entire organization, and certainly in the show. He is not going to leave anything to chance. He is fighting for something, and he's willing to make the sacrifices, whatever it takes. And we'll get to that by the end. Meanwhile, on the other side, we have the Imperials. We have director Krennic, of course. Ben Mendelsohn comes back, which is he's a lot of fun. He brings a lot of breath of life into this show. Again, it's apart from the sweat hogs, there is really nothing funny about this show. And to see at least Ben Mendelsohn, chewing the scenery with aplomb, I mean, he is taking great relish in. I think he was quoted as saying he portrayed Krennic a little more fruity this season, which it's an interesting way to describe it. But of course, he has a lot more zest, shall we say, in his performance here than in Rogue One, where he basically was at his wit's end trying to keep the Death Star operation in his hands when he was losing it to Tarkin and Vader. And he's trying to sell the Imperial bureaucracy on the clean, renewable energy for the Empire and so forth on this planet Gorm. And really what they want to do is sort of, I don't know, strip mine the planet and just take all its resources in honor to get the Death Star fixed and prepared or whatever. So this is the main thrust of the series. This is what the MacGuffin is. They want to get this whole thing on Gorman settled, and it has to do with spiders. They're trying to convince the people at large that the spiders or something, they're wanting the silk of the spiders or something. I don't know. I mean, honestly, a lot of it is so boring. And it's not just the long, drawn out scenes. I mean, we also get Cyril and Deidre back. I think of their names. I affectionately refer to them as Imperial Broad and Budget Kyle MacLachlan. And I honestly enjoy Budget Kyle MacLachlan. I mean, he is a very interesting actor. I don't have his name right here, but he has either the best or worst poker face in the series, because you can tell just by looking at him that something's up, that he is like, he's not all there. But then again, he looks a little too goofy to be threatening. So, when the Parisians that he goes to meet on Gorman, they think that they're hooking him into their rebellion. They got rebellion plans. They're like another small splinter group, and they think they got him hooked, but he's really playing them. He and Deidre, the Imperial broad, which she got put in charge of this whole thing, which I never bought their relationship. I honestly don't understand how that got anywhere. She looks like she doesn't have a romantic bone in her body. I mean, she's completely cold and dispassionate when it comes to anything other than just taking orders and whatever. And Cyril is sort of just like a simp, and uh, even in the sense of the real meaning of that word, which was a abbreviation for simpleton, he basically is just at the smallest level, a pencil pusher. He just is there he wants to make sure things are getting done in the right way and the orderly way. And what kicked his whole story off was, you know, trying to find out where Andor was, because Cassian killed the cops at the beginning of the first season. I don't know. I mean, I don't really buy that romance. And then, of course, we get Rosie the Bounty Lady back, which is his mother. And again, more time just wasted bringing her back into the story. And he of the crunchberry addiction, eating that crunchberry cereal, he does it again in this episode. I mean, at least in the early part of the series, this season. So meanwhile, we've got a lot of other guys. Like Bix is back on some Midwest farmer planet. I don't remember what it was called. Um, the Star Wars Galaxy's Kansas planet, and she's basically there waiting for Andor to come back. She's singing "Someday My Prince Will Come," and unfortunately, this was the storyline that was sort of the hysteria that came around. This was the attempted rape scene with Bix, and you know, I don't, on principle, like the idea of an attempted rape in a Star Wars TV show. I don't think you need that. However, I will say I think it was handled well. I mean, basically, if you're a child watching this, if you were 8 years old or something, they didn't make it too blatantly obvious what the Imperial officer was after with her. He basically is trying to kiss her, and she breaks his nose, and then he tries to beat her up. And that's kind of what a kid would take from this. I don't think that this is so adult that a child couldn't watch it. Although I think if you tried to sit a child down to watch this, they'd be so bored they would probably tune out after the first 2 episodes. I don't think they would even make it to the second episode. But I don't think necessarily. But the problem I had with it was that Bix identifies it as attempted rape, and I think without her saying that, it wouldn't carry the weight of the real world connotations that word has. And that, is something that you read back into that scene that makes it even worse than what it was. But again, I mean, if you watch a classic episode of Star Trek, I mean, they did have, attempted rapes and murder on the show, and nobody was, traumatized by it. I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think most of us as kids watch Star Trek reruns, and none of us ever said, hey, that's an attempted rape. I kind of feel like the same thing would go here, if a kid was to watch it. So again, I'm not a big fan of the situation being in Star Wars, but it was handled about as well as it could have been. And you also have to remember that I think starting with The Last Jedi, when we had the first curse word uttered in Star Wars, and we get a couple of them here, they still are holding back on the F-bomb. They don't want the F-bombs for some reason, because Tony Gilroy, I think, was going to try to put it into the first season, but Lucasfilm kind of nixed that one and said, look, let's let's not go too far. We can do the attempted rape, but we're not going to say the F bomb. But they still have a couple of curse words in this. And I feel like, starting with The Last Jedi, the idea of Star Wars losing its innocence is something that disturbs me. I don't really think that's something that I ever wanted to see in Star Wars. And I'm pretty sure that nobody else really does either. But, there is this small percentage that no matter what the franchise is, they want it to grow up. And I say this all the time with Batman, with, Star Wars. They want the R-rated Batman. They want the R-rated Star Wars. There is nothing inherently positive about putting mature themes into something that was created for children. And I know a lot of people, I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail. I know a lot of people resent when I say that Star Wars was created for children, but it was. And just because maybe The Empire Strikes Back didn't have the most kiddie involved storyline, or Revenge of the Sith didn't have the most kiddie friendly storyline, it doesn't mean that it wasn't something that was created by and large for children to be able to see and internalize. I mean, for instance, I think George Lucas literally had child psychiatrists and psychologists looking at the ending of Empire Strikes Back to make sure it wasn't going to traumatize children. This is a guy that, they're trying to say did not make a kiddie movie. He was afraid that that was going to be too strong for them. Personally, I think I still to this day have issue with the death of Shmi Skywalker. I think that was a little too intense for the younger kids in the audience. So again, by comparison, I don't really think anything that's done in Andor is probably as strong and as potent as Shmi's death. So, take that for what you will. But Brasso dies, and they evacuate that Kansas planet, and basically we do another time jump here. Let's see what's the next arc. All right, the next arc. This is third arc. Andor is shacking up with Bix now, and apparently they've been working together for a long time, and she's in a bad way. And credit to the actress, she is really great in this part. She looks like a broken woman. And part of the thing I was afraid of with her is I feel like they wanted Bix to be, and again, this is all Les Miserables in space, the idea that she is like basically going to be tormented unto death. And I felt like that's what they were going to do with her character. Fortunately, they don't. I thought she was going to end up dying after being basically the show's punching bag, because she was tortured last season. She is assaulted this season. And the idea is that, this is not a character that's going to get a happy ending. She is basically becoming addicted to drugs in this arc. And she's taking some kind of liquid stuff. And I just felt like this was going to be a problem, because I really like Bix as a character, because again, for that reason, that she is sort of the soap opera heroine, where they throw everything they can at her, and she still manages to survive, and she still manages to persevere where it would probably break a lot of people. And it shows strength. It shows that she has courage, but she's at the lowest at this point. And basically, as the arc ends, they have to. Luthen comes in and tries to get her back in the game, because Cassian is sort of protecting her now and trying to treat her as, just stay home and keep your head down. Everything will be all right. Luthen is like, look, we could use you, and you're not doing yourself any favors staying home and taking drugs. So he tries to get her in the game. Cassian doesn't like that. But eventually, what brings her out of this is that they go back and they kill the torturer guy. She breaks into the place, puts the torture device on him for, 5 minutes or whatever it takes for her to go down and leave the building, and they blow up the building. So basically, that kind of gets the monkey off her back. She already killed the Imperial officer that was trying to attack her. So basically, anybody that's tried to abuse her is dead now, and they kind of get past that going forward, which I thought was the best thing to do. All right, we've got Lonnie back, and he is still high up the Imperial chain, and he's still reporting to Luthen. It's interesting to see they bring that character back. Uh, Meanwhile, the whole thing on Gorman is starting to pop off, and let me see if I can get to the next chapter here at my notes. Oh, this is where Cassian does like a spy mission on Gorman as a a fabric designer or something. I don't know. He's in the clothing business. He's in the apparel business. And this looks like it would be interesting, but there really isn't a whole lot to this storyline. The most interesting thing about this part was Will. Wilcom, I think his name is. I think of him as Will Scarlet because he kind of actually looks like the kid that played Will Scarlet on Robin Hood, the BBC version, to me anyway. But Saw Gerrera comes back into the storyline, and again, he's a he's sort of like a force of nature that this is kind of before he becomes as insulated as he is, I think, in Rogue One. But again, Forrest Whitaker cannot give a bad performance, particularly as this character. I've never seen him do a bad performance as Saw Gerrera, and he basically is another one like Luthen, where, and it's sad they don't have another scene together. They had a scene in the first season together, but they never get back together here. But he has the same kind of ethics as Luthen, where he sees people, even if they are helpful to him, as a liability that at some point is going to have to be taken out. So now that Will is there trying to help him engage with some kind of rocket engine or something, again, a lot of the particulars were boring to me, and I didn't really follow them too well. But he doesn't have no compunction about killing Will as soon as he's done teaching his underling how to man this rocket engine or whatever. Come to find out that the guy that was being taught by Will was a spy, an Imperial agent or something. How we know this, I don't know. They have the alien say something like, "Here is the proof." Dun dun dun. We don't know what the proof is, but we're supposed to take his word for it, I guess. But it just comes out as like a shock, a shock scene where you think he's going to kill Will and then he kills the other guy. I mean, I don't know. It seemed like a cheap thrill or whatever. But the funny thing is they try to give a backstory to why Saw has the breathing apparatus that we see in Rogue One, because his lungs are shot by then. And again, this is another kind of like, it's corny, but it works, where apparently Saw kind of gets off on breathing in rocket fumes. And he teaches Will to do that. And it's sort of, I love the smell of napalm in the morning or something. I don't know. It's just, it gets them in the mindset of what they're doing, and like, yeah, this is what it's all about. And Will does it and is like physically overcome, but Saw is used to it at this point. But eventually, at some point, it's going to take its toll on his lungs, and have him be in the condition that we see him in. Meanwhile, Cyril is doing what he's doing to the Parisians, and I don't know. I think my notes are not complete here about this. I don't think. Uh, yeah, that's when they find him out that he's not a he's not on their side, the Parisians. Then we get the party. Let's talk about that. What a swell party this is. I don't know if Ben Mendelsohn decided to throw that in honor of Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, but it was really funny. Luthen is like throwing a party there, and Mon and her husband, and Krennic and Lonnie and Clea is all there, and they have to do like this undercover mission where they have to shut down some thing, and she has to do it while they're not paying attention, and it led to some good drama. That is she going to be discovered? Oh, gee, I don't know. Meanwhile, they recast Bail Organa. I don't know what this guy's name is, but he was very good. I honestly can see him as Bail Organa easier than Jimmy Smits, because Jimmy Smits was already a big star. So I mean, he did good as Bail Organa. He's a good actor, but I feel like bringing this guy in, and I've never seen him before from Adam. I feel like I could believe in him as Bail Organa easier than Jimmy Smits. So honestly, I kind of wish they started with him for that reason alone. But again, I mean, Jimmy Smith's a good actor, and he's in the, the original saga. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I don't feel too badly that they changed actors. I mean, they got Jimmy Smith for Rogue One. So, I mean, this is like, it's different when it's, well, I suppose there really is not too much time separating Rogue One from Return of the Jedi. It's only a matter of what, 3 years or something, and we go from Genevieve O'Reilly to what's the lady's name that played Mon Mothma? Uh, she's still alive, by the way. It kind of would have been nice to have them bring her in for like a cameo of something, and just to sort of pass the baton, so to speak. But I don't know if she's still acting or not. But she's like 90, I think now. Um, Now the Parisian operation is going on. They're going to do something, and it's just this long and uninteresting arc where they bring back Sally Struthers, my affectionate name for Mon's cousin. What's her name? Is it Jay or Jed? I don't remember. But anyway, her lesbian lover is brought back into the show, and they have to have a lesbian moment, a romantic moment, or whatever. She is accidentally killed by one of the Parisian guys, and it's an accidental death, but Sally really lays into the guy and gives him a guilt trip, and he's like pretty upset about it already. But it's like, I mean, come on, lady, you never made a mistake. It's what I mean. It's supposed to be serious. I get it, but I mean, I'm like, this show is like as earnest as like a broken arm. You know what I mean? It's like there is nothing light about it whatsoever. I mean, honestly, after the Sweat Hogs episodes in the beginning, they were, I don't know if they were unintentionally funny, or if that was the intent, but there was nothing funny about the show until um K2SO finally shows up in like the last two episodes. Okay, so we have the next episode here. What is this? This is episode 7. It's now we're finally on Yavin, which is cool because it felt like for the longest time I felt like I was distracted by the fact that all this stuff is going on, like too far away from Rogue One, and I didn't really know when we were going to get something that ties in. So we're finally on Yavin now, and Bix is seeing a Force healer or something to try to heal Cassian's shoulder or something. I've never heard of a Force healer before. I guess this is something that's, I think this is like something from the sequel trilogy. That didn't Rey do something like that in the Rise of Skywalker? I don't really know if this is something that can be traced back to like Lucas's version of Star Wars, but she basically tells Bix and Cassian that he's meant for great things, and so on and so forth. And this has a profound effect on Bix later, because she's like the concerned girlfriend. Now Will shows up to Andor and asks him to assassinate the Imperial Broad. He says she killed his father. I don't remember that, but fair enough. Meanwhile, Budget Cal McLaughlin, Cyril, he's starting to get snippy with her. I did not really understand this. I mean, we'll get into that in a second, but he's kind of acting like he doesn't understand that they're working for a totalitarian regime. And that's basically what happens here at the end of this. I don't really understand this episode 8. Now this is really padded out. This episode, this is really takes a long time to get to its point. But I really don't understand that they know they're working for a totalitarian regime, but they're kind of like, oh, gee, really? The Empire's going to kill all these people on Gorman? I really didn't expect that. I mean, after all, when Grand Moff Tarkin came to town, whatever it was, 5 years ago, they were talking about, he basically landed his spacecraft in the public square on top of like 5,000 people or whatever it was. I had no idea that they were going to try to kill these people. Come on, will you? I, I, I said as a joke on Twitter, too late, too late. The realization came too late, in the words of the poet. But and so Cyril's going off now, and he's threatening Imperial Broad, Deidre, grabbing her by the throat and everything in a very dramatic fashion. For whatever reason, he feels like he's been used by the Empire, which, well, isn't everybody? It's funny because I mean that's kind of what Andor is supposed to be showing. It's like on the one hand, the Empire is using a lot of the common man, and they're also using a lot of their lower tier bureaucrats. But then again, the rebellion is almost the same way. They're almost just as bad because they're using some of their lower tiered men, and they don't necessarily care if they're expendable, because as long as the job is getting done, and there's no emotional attachment to these guys that are going to be taken out. We see that early on with Cassian in Rogue One when he kills that guy, and he was like, you know too much. You can't get out of the situation, so bye. So anyway, Cyril ends up confronting Cassian while Cassian's trying to kill Deidre. Is that her name? And I was just screaming at the television, "Take the shot! Take the shot!" Oh, he had like 14 chances to kill that Imperial Broad, and he's just like, eh, let me wait until I've got a better shot. And then he gets another, and he passes that one too, and then he waits for the next shot, and he passes that one too. And I'm like, come on, man, put all of us out of our misery and just take the shot. But he doesn't, and finally he gets into a fight here with Kyle, Cyril, excuse me, and he doesn't even know who Cyril is. And to me, I don't really know about this. I mean, the reason why this works at all is because they're playing on Jean Valjean and Les Miserables, and for some reason Cyril is so fixated on bringing Cassian to justice, and he caused all this problem for him or whatever, that he's hell bent for killing him. But again, I mean, he hasn't set eyes on Cassian in like 5 years. Canonically, I mean, unless there's something going on in between that we don't know about. I mean, I don't see him looking at his hologram every night before he goes to bed saying, one day. You would think he would like have gotten over this by now, or he wouldn't even remember what he looks like. I'm like, what is this so important to him? We don't really get that reinforced this season. It's just like he sees him. He's like, oh, yes, that guy. It's that guy I'm supposed to hate. I got to kill him. And I don't know. It just didn't work for me the way they did it. But I mean, like, again, if you're familiar with Les Miserables, and I have a working understanding of the story, I've seen, I think, like 3 different adaptions of it, at least 3, then you kind of know what they're doing here. But I mean, without that, it kind of falls flat without that kind of, to fall back on. Terrence Stamp, I made this joke. Young Terrence Stamp says rebellions are built on hope. Again, this whole Gorman thing, the Parisians are all out in the public square chanting, and obviously the Imperials are trying to find an excuse to open fire. Now, a lot of people are trying to use Andor as like real world politics and so on and so forth. This is kind of like, isn't this like January 6th? I mean, basically, the government is like trying to provoke the Parisians here to do something. And when something kind of finally happens, it's the excuse to say, oh, okay, let's, open fire. And I don't know, it comes off kind of heavy handed. But I mean, it just feels like they're trying so hard to be socially relevant. I mean, not so much like it has to be topical, like they're comparing it to the, you know, past 5 years or whatever. But it feels like they're trying to be relevant. But it kind of beats you over the head with it. You know what I mean? The relevance of it. I don't know. So we've got K2SO finally come into it, and I guess those kind of droids are crowd control, and they basically just fling Parisians all across the place. And like I said, I kind of respect the fact that we've been so conditioned to think that if a human body is thrown 30 yards into a wall or something, that you're just going to survive and you're going to brush yourself off and get up. But this basically they kill like half the city square by throwing people, not even shooting or doing anything else, but just literally throwing people across the square, and it's enough to kill them because I mean this is that kind of show. Um, for some reason, Cassian has the bright idea to take one of these droids who was like smashed in half with a truck, a van, or something, and he brings it back to Yavin to repurpose it. I don't know. I mean, it feels like in a way they had to shoehorn in how he met K2SO, and I feel like it's okay. But I mean, I don't know why they didn't bring him in much earlier because like I said, I have a feeling it would have been too funny because K2SO is too humorous of a character for this kind of show. So bringing him in at the 11th hour is always something that was going to happen. I think this was supposed to be a 5-year series. They were planning on doing 5 years of this. But for whatever reason, either Lucasfilm got cold feet and said, look, we can't drag this out for 5 years. Wrap up all your storylines in one season. Or maybe Tony Gilroy just didn't want to drag this out because it's a dragged out show as it is. I can't imagine this thing going on for 5 years. I mean, the pace is so poor. I mean, Star Wars was known for two things under George Lucas: faster and more intense. I mean, they might have the intensity, but they don't have the fastness. The pacing is like way, way slow. And the intensity, honestly, I don't feel it. I mean, I feel like everything is done methodically. It doesn't feel like anything is done with intensity. I don't know. All right, so we're getting down here to the end. Let's see. This is the last arc now. Um, uh, Cassian is sent to save Mon Mothma, and Mon has been getting more vocally opposed to the Empire, and the Gorman situation basically sets her off, and she's going to publicly say something, and then Bail Organa is like, "No, I can't do this. I'll set you up for it, and give you the floor, but I can't talk, against the Emperor right now." But she feels like now's the time for her to do that. And of course, this is all canon because Mon Mothma was an Imperial senator who, by the time of Return of the Jedi, she's working for the Rebel Alliance. But, I took it that she left the Senate once the Senate was dissolved. But apparently, she just makes this like big grandstanding moment to step down from the Senate because she knows that basically a dissenting voice is going to be silenced. So this was I think this was the best episode of the season. Mon gives an impassioned speech, and she points out that the Emperor Palpatine is the scum of the earth, as we all know. She doesn't trust her aide, which I don't get. I maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. She thinks there's something shady about the guy, but come to find out he's the right guy and he's helping her along and helping her and Andor escape. The limo driver or whatever was the guy that she shouldn't have trusted. I don't believe she trusted him either, but Andor basically at this point he wants to retire with Bix, and Bix gives him basically a Dear Cassian letter at the end of the episode because you know she feels like she's holding him back with what he has to do with the rebellion, and so she takes it on the lam. That's the last time he sees her, is that um video chat thing. Um and so it's a very funny scene where Mon is like a pampered politician, and Andor is like shooting people right in front of her, and she has like reminded me of you know, Henry Jones Sr. with, look what you did. I can't believe what you did. Because he's just like, he's at the point where he can just pull the trigger like nothing. Andor, he's got, he's got a notch on his blaster that must be like, a mile long. So, well, let's just they wrap it up with K2SO, uh, coming to life after they rebranded him and everything, and it was really fun to see him come back because it's like he was one of the highlights of Rogue One, and it was good to see. Now, the one thing that we don't get to is Andor's sister. I want to make sure we remember to talk about that. Um, they don't really let you know what happened to her, and I guess this is like a lingering plot line that if they ever want to bring it in again, they could do something about it. Now, I thought maybe in this next episode they were trying to say it was Clea because she has been Luthen's confidant the whole time, and we get the flashbacks where he discovers her when he's part of like an imperial regimen or something on this planet where he's forced to lay waste to the place and stuff. Um, Honestly, I wasn't crazy about that backstory that they gave them because it kind of made sense in a way that, I mean, if they want to say that he found Clea and that's why they sort of can trust each other because she basically grew up with him and they don't necessarily have a father-daughter relationship, which was interesting because they pass themselves off as father and daughter, and he's like, well, that's only when it benefits us because he can't even become that close to her for fear that that would like jeopardize his objectivity, you know, because he can't see her as a daughter because if she ever crosses him in some way, he's got to cut her loose, and that means the end of her. And so he can't like bring himself to treat her as his adopted daughter because if he did, that puts another, dimension of difficulty he has to get over. If he sees her as an asset, that's all she needs to be for him and vice versa. Um so they go off and they become like scavengers and that's how they get into the collectability market, the antique market or whatever is because they're like scavengers sort of getting rare antiques and selling them at like flea markets and then they finally graduate their way up into having their own place. I don't really feel like I've seen the progression. I mean, he's like some kind of shell shock soldier, then he's a scavenger, then he's a rebel upstart. I the the moment of truth comes when he tries to get Clea to blow up a bridge or something with some, uh, I guess, Empire on it, and she doesn't do it, but he does, and he's kind of like telling her this is like there's no way to turn back once you start doing this life, and this is like your last chance if you want to turn back. But again, I don't know if there was a principle enough there that really felt like it worked strong enough. And then, of course, you have his death. Now, this didn't really work for me either. Now, at some point, the Imperial Broad just finds the bomb that Luthen. This goes back to season one, which I don't really remember exactly how this happened, but it was a bomb that Andor stole or something for him, and he used it to blow something up. And she found out, she brought it back to him, and he basically stabs himself rather than get captured and tortured. Which, all right, I get Luthen would do that, but it does feel very anticlimactic. It doesn't really feel like this guy that gave his all for the glory of the rebellion, he's going to die by stabbing himself. And there's no blaze of glory. There's no going down with the ship, so to speak. There's no, you know what I mean? It feels very anticlimactic. And I think that's what they were going for. So, I mean, I'm not going to say this was a mistake. I think they purposely were going to say, look, there's no glory in doing what he did his whole life. Now we got Lonnie comes back before this happens and says, I want you to take me out of this. I'm not in the game anymore because they're getting too close. Something's going to happen to me, and I want out. And I've been faithful for a number of years. And he's like, "Well, tell me everything you know. We'll take you and your family to Yavin." And Lonnie, like an idiot, trusts him. I don't know why he trusts him. And he basically spills his guts about what he knows about the Death Star. And, Luthen just takes him out without a moment's hesitation. And so, I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's live by the sword, die by the sword. If he's going to kill everybody else to safeguard this secret and everything, he has to do it to himself. He has to. But I just think that feels so anticlimactic, knowing how important this guy was to the Rebel Alliance all those years and all the sacrifices he made. Sure, he sacrifices himself, but again, it's left to Clea because, and we knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen from the very beginning. I mean, she's going to have to be the one to pull the plug because, Imperial Broad rushes him to the hospital and keeps him going, and they're trying to save his life and bring him out of it so that they can torture him and get whatever information they need from him. And so Clea has to sneak in and pull the plug and basically allow him to die. And she's a good actress, that girl. They came out said just recently, I think, that this was her first job, for her first big acting gig. And she does a good job with this. And, you feel for her that she is her father's daughter, even though he's not her father. But that's the point. She knows that this is what he wants. And she knows this is what she has to do if anything that she's done means anything. So she has to do it. And again, I see it from a writing standpoint why this makes sense. But again, it's kind of underwhelming in the sense that, well, this guy that did so much is getting the plug pulled by his adopted daughter. It's not really as satisfactory as you think it could be. All right, so then the final, after all the screw ups that she's done, Deidre, the Imperial Broad, she gets put into conference here with Inspector Krennic. What's his name? Director Krennic, excuse me. Inspector Gadget, maybe I'm thinking. But and he again does some fruity overtures to her, but and in his way of trying to get, and he's a great actor. Again, I love this character, Krennic. I mean, he's so good. It's sad that we're not going to get more of him, and it's sad that we're not going to get any more of him in uh Marvel, because Secret Invasion basically did away with his character. Not that that was the most interesting character these ever had, but at least it would have kept him around. Now he's pretty much out of both franchises. And so basically they sentenced her to Aurora Pente, or whatever they call that place where Andor was. A lot of people were speculating maybe she was going to die on the Death Star. But this is kind of more fitting, where she's just like going to waste away in an Imperial gulag. This is where Andor was with Kino, which a lot of people like that storyline from season 1. I hated it. I mean, Kino, what a Luke. The guy just goes back when he's leading all these people and trying to be a leader, making an impassioned speech, and then it's like, oh, I can't swim. I guess I'll go back and I'll go back in my cell and I'll wait for the 5 or 6 Imperial guards that are back there to beat me to death, right? Because I can't possibly figure some way out off the place. It was so stupid. That was honestly so stupid. And I really felt like that was insulting my intelligence, because I felt like there was some way to get that guy off that Alcatraz island or whatever. Even if you can't swim, figure something out. There's like 500 guys escaping. I'm sure not all of them could swim. And I'm pretty sure that they figured something out, and we're never left to know that, because everybody in this show has to suffer and probably die in a horrible way. So again, Andor goes to save Cleo because she's she's giving like a distress call, but then he gets down there and she just wants to pass on the information. She doesn't really want to leave with him. Now, for a hot moment here, I thought she was Andor's sister. Now, I don't know if they're, you know, they might not be the same race, the actor and actress, but she could pass for whatever race that Andor is supposed to be in the galaxy far, far away. The fact that she's got like a British accent and he's got like a Argentinian accent or whatever he has, I honestly don't know. It just could be because they were brought up in different places. I mean, I know a lot of people were like born like I mean, I don't know. I think like if you're born in America and you get brought to London, you're gonna have a London accent. If you're born in London, you're brought to America, you're gonna have an American accent. So it really doesn't matter what the accent difference is. But they kind of subtly suggest that maybe something is going on here. But I guess that's not going to really be the official story. I don't know. Um. Anyway, so they try to save her, and let's see. Let me get my notes going here. Basically, they get her out. They save her. That's like the big action scene in the show. It feels like it ends kind of on a. I don't want to say like anticlimactic because the final scene basically starts leading towards Rogue One. So Rogue One is the big bang ending, the big finish. But we don't really find out anything about what happens to Sally Struthers. She kind of brings what's her name? Jed? I don't know. She brings a Cleo to her pad and they sort of just shoot the breeze and get drunk or whatever. I mean, I guess she lives to fight another day. I don't know exactly. We get Admiral Raditz back and a lot of the other kooks from the council. They don't bring back General Dudana, which I found interesting, but they bring those other guys that are like vocal opponents to Cassian and everything that they're trying to do. Oh, we can't do this and whatever. Bail Organa kind of seems like a stick in the mud at this point. He kind of like has to be worn down to tell Cassian, all right, just do whatever you want. It'll be fine. He does get to say, "May the Force be with you," which is a first in the show. They don't really play up the Force besides the Force healer or whatever. They don't act like the Force is a big thing in this, which I mean, I can understand to an extent because it seems like the um the Force is sort of like an ancient religion to these people, and a lot of them are not keeping up with it. You know what I mean? They're not reading their Bible. They're sort of it's like from a day gone by. So I kind of can see why that's not something that's talked about often. But I kind of feel like there needs to be a little more of that, a little more connection to that. And I was glad to see Bail Organa while I could because he him and Uncle Owen are sort of the unsung heroes of Star Wars. You don't get enough of them, and I feel like Kenobi didn't really give enough screen time to Uncle Owen, and we probably didn't get quite enough screen time for Bail Organa in comparison to like Mon Mothma, who really was, like I said, the centerpiece of the show. Um, so then we get the old Imperial Major. I don't remember the dude's name, Pagazar or whatever. He does a Frankie Pantangeli. And I thought that was a very good scene because that I think that was handled very well because that's what these guys would do. It's like he puts a blaster on the table, he shuts the door, and then the guy's like, "Nah, leave him alone." And the stormtroopers hear the blast, and they're like, "What?" And he's like, "Nah, leave him alone." I said, and I thought that was really good. I mean, that to me, that's how you deal with the fate of a character, like the presence of that guy. You could tell he was an important guy. He wasn't just going to get demoted. He wasn't just going to go to Sing Sing like the Imperial Broad. He was going to take his own way out, so to speak, and do Harry Carey or whatever. All right, and Bix, who did not die, as Charles Dickens once wrote, last thing we see from her is that she's holding a baby. Isn't that nice? Babies are nice. Babies are nice, and Bix is nice, and she ended up having a happy ending after all. Well, with some reservation. The caveat, of course, is that Andor won't be home for dinner, but the idea is that she was a survivor. That's what I wanted to see her ending be, as I said earlier on. She survived, she thrived, and she's going to, you know, be a good shepherd for the next generation. She's not like done with the fight, but she is out of the trenches, so to speak, which I thought was a good ending for that character. Again, we don't find out really anything else about Cassian's sister or what's going to happen with Cleo. Um, that Will Scarlet kid, I don't know what happened to him. Um, Aunt May's accordion droid, we see him a couple times during the show asking for Cassian. I suppose he never sees him again. So again, there's a lot of sort of bittersweet moments here at the end that they try to balance it out, where it's not a happy ending necessarily, but then again, it's not bleak and bitter. Um, so again, I guess I don't really know how I would put a number, like a review number on this. I would probably I'd probably have to give it maybe 3 stars. I don't know if that's a little too much. 3 stars usually means that I'll watch it again. I don't really have any intention on watching this again. So maybe we'll say 2.5 stars. That might do it. But there are some good scenes. There are some good performances. There are a lot of good actors, like I said. Um, if they could condense this into like maybe if they could condense both seasons into like 2 movies or maybe 3, because I imagine with the time jumps it would be a little difficult to try to. But honestly, you can get like 2.5 hour movies, two 2.25 movies out of it. I think that would probably serve this whole thing better than what they did with the miniseries, because if you cut out a lot of the stuff that was just padding for the sake of padding and nonsensical stuff that really didn't move the plot along, as the bard said, brevity is the soul of wit, and I would love to know what he would have thought of this show, because it was just too padded and went on for too long. But yeah, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. Begrudgingly, I'll give it 2.5 stars, and I would give it maybe a 5 out of 10, maybe a 4.5 out of 10. Again, I'm probably gonna forget this show, and I honestly had to look at my notes in order to try to even talk about it, because I don't remember too much about it, and I'm probably never gonna watch it again unless I might just for the heck of it say, "Oh, I remember this episode was pretty good." Like I said, the one where Andor is rescuing Mon Mothma. That was a good hour of television. That was a fun, breezy watch. I could see myself watching that one again. Maybe 1 or 2 other episodes. I don't think I'll ever go back to this. It doesn't have the replayability of a Rogue One or other things like a Kenobi or I mean, I don't really see myself going back to like, I could see myself maybe going back to Ahsoka, seeing as how there's another season coming up, and they did some interesting things there. Had a good cast, but this is probably still behind, at least behind Kenobi and Ahsoka. It's definitely better than the Acolyte. It's, the Book of Boba Fett is sort of an anomaly. That's sort of like it's half the Mandalorian. I don't know. I mean, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining me and if I'm going to do a letter grade, I'll say a C. A C, I guess. A C minus, maybe. Again, just not my cup of tea. I don't enjoy grown-up Star Wars. I don't think this kind of tone is correct for Star Wars. I don't think that the subject matter was particularly Star Wars, but there was a lot of good elements in it. If they had focused on them a little bit more instead of going off into some, you know, Les Miserables areas where it was just 45 minutes of Parisians chanting I mean, if it was a tightened up production, maybe uh, I would have upped the score. But I think that this really wasn't what I think of for Star Wars, and I will continue to enjoy Rogue One and have this backstory in my mind, even if I never watch it again, which I may or may not. We'll see. We'll see if absence makes the heart grow fonder for this show, but honestly, I don't see myself seeing it again. All right, so let me know what you think about Andor Season 2. What did you think about Andor Season 1? What do you think about Rogue One? Does this make a cohesive trilogy for you? The trilogy in between trilogies? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.